From the moment that stranger in a fake HOA uniform walked toward my disabled son, everything inside me froze, and my quiet afternoon instantly turned into a storm of fear, courage, and determination. He tried to act like he had authority, tried to threaten us with false rules and intimidation, but he had no idea that he was crossing a line no parent would ever tolerate. As my son looked at me with confusion and fear in his eyes, I knew I had one choice: stay calm, protect him, and fight back the right way. This is the story of how a fake HOA cop tried to take advantage of the wrong family, and how truth, evidence, and justice changed everything. It was a peaceful evening outside our home, the sun setting gently over the neighborhood, while my son sat in his wheelchair near the driveway, enjoying the breeze and the quiet moment. He loves watching the world go by, feeling included in everyday life, and that small space outside our house means freedom and comfort to him. Then a man we'd never seen before walked up in a black vest labeled HOA cop, his voice sharp, his attitude aggressive, and his presence immediately unsettling. He claimed my son was violating a community rule simply by being near the sidewalk, and the way he spoke felt less like enforcement and more like harassment. He pointed at my son's wheelchair ramp and insisted it wasn't approved, threatening fines and even saying he had the authority to remove my son from the area if we didn't comply. My heart pounded as anger and fear collided inside me, because instead of compassion or understanding, this man chose intimidation towards someone vulnerable. My son's hands trembled on the wheels of his chair, and I could see confusion in his face as he tried to understand why a stranger was shouting at him. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that responding calmly was stronger than reacting emotionally, especially when someone abuses fake power. I asked the man politely to show identification, any proof of position, or written authority that allowed him to speak or act the way he did, but he avoided every question. He waved his hand dismissively, raised his voice louder, and claimed he could detain my son for not following rules that didn't even exist in our community handbook. That was the moment I realized something was deeply wrong, not just with his attitude, but with his entire presence, because nothing about him felt official or legitimate. Instead of arguing back, I calmly pulled out my phone and began recording everything, knowing that truth becomes powerful when it's documented. The moment he noticed the camera, his tone shifted, but instead of backing down, he tried to intimidate us further, insisting that recording him was not allowed on our own property. I stood firm, reminding him that we were on our land, that we respected real authority, and that we would only cooperate with verified officials acting within the law. Neighbors slowly stepped outside, drawn by the noise, and their presence made him even more nervous as his fake confidence began to crumble under the weight of attention. What he didn't realize was that every second of his behavior was now being witnessed, recorded, and prepared to be used against his lies. I contacted the real HOA office immediately, explaining the situation while still recording, and their response confirmed exactly what I suspected. No officer, no inspection, no visit was scheduled. They told me their organization did not employ anyone with that title, and certainly not someone authorized to confront residents or threaten them in front of their families. Hearing the truth filled me with both relief and concern, because now it wasn't just rudeness, it was impersonation, intimidation, and potential exploitation of vulnerable residents. With their guidance, I also contacted local authorities, not out of anger, but out of responsibility to protect my son. When law enforcement arrived, the man tried to change his story, suddenly claiming he was just checking compliance, and that everything was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But the officers reviewed the footage, listened to witnesses, and examined his clothing and badge, which turned out to be nothing more than props and printed patches. My son watched quietly, still shaken, but I gently reassured him that he was safe, that nothing was his fault, and that real justice comes from truth, not fear. The officers handled the situation professionally, making sure everything remained calm and respectful while they addressed his actions through proper legal procedure. In the following days, the HOA board invited us to a formal meeting, not to defend anything, but to acknowledge the situation, review safety measures, and support our family. They apologized for the emotional stress my son had experienced and promised to strengthen verification processes so no one could impersonate authority in our neighborhood again. I shared how important accessibility and dignity are for people with disabilities, and how compassion, communication, and respect must always come before judgment or enforcement. The conversation shifted from confrontation to awareness, turning a frightening experience into an opportunity for education, empathy, and community improvement. My son slowly regained his confidence to sit outside again, and every day I watched him smile a little more, knowing that his safety and dignity were now better protected. What could have become a story of fear instead became a story of resilience, patience, and the power of doing things the right way, calmly, thoughtfully, and responsibly. We didn't seek revenge, and we didn't respond with anger. We chose documentation, communication, and lawful action, because real strength lives in self-control. And through the choice, we proved that justice doesn't need aggression, it only needs trust. Neighbors began sharing their own concerns and experiences, and together we created a stronger sense of unity, learning to look out for one another with kindness instead of suspicion. The community built new channels for reporting suspicious behavior, improving safety not just for my son, but for every family, child, and elderly resident in our area. What once felt like a frightening confrontation eventually transformed into a reminder that neighborhoods thrive when people stand together instead of standing apart. And in that unity, we discovered the true meaning of community, protection, support, and responsibility shared among everyone. Looking back, I realized the moment wasn't just about stopping a fake officer. It was about standing up for human dignity, especially for someone who already faces enough challenges in life. My son may have felt scared for a moment, but he also witnessed strength through calm action, proof that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply refuses to be intimidated. He learned that his life, his presence, and his space in this world are valuable, and no false authority can take that away from him. And I learned that a parent's greatest power is not anger, it is love, patience, and the unwavering commitment to protect with integrity. So if you ever face a situation where someone tries to use fear, intimidation, or fake authority against you or your family, remember this story, and take a breath before reacting. Stay calm, gather proof, seek real help, and trust that truth has a way of revealing itself when handled with patience and clarity. Because real justice isn't about fighting, it's about standing firm, protecting what matters, and believing in the power of doing things the right way. And that's how a frightening moment turned into a victory for safety, dignity, and justice, not just for my son, but for everyone in our community.